On behalf of VMUG, I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast, Storage Innovations Enhancing IT Productivity, moderated by Mike Grandinetti from Reduxio. Thank you for participating in today's webcast and for your continued support in the VMUG program. You can learn more about VMUG by clicking the Documents in the Resource List widget. Before we begin today, I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webcast will be recorded and available for on-demand. And second, a Q&A session will follow today's presentation, and all questions will need to be entered into the Q&A widget window that is directly to your left. Third, there will be a short online evaluation that will pop up as you exit the webcast. Please make sure to take a minute and let us know what you thought of today's session and what you might like to see going forward. All right, so let's get started. I would like to introduce you to today's moderator, Mike Grandinetti, Chief Marketing and Corporate Strategy Officer from Reduxio. Mike, welcome, and I would now like to turn things over to you.
Candace, thank you so much for hosting us today, and I want to welcome everybody to our 3rd consecutive quarterly VMUG webinar. Today, our webinar will focus on important innovations in the world of data storage, management, and protection. The theme for today really stems from the fact that in this largely digital, always-on world that we are living in, and as IT professionals trying to manage, the evolution of storage infrastructure has created a lot of challenges for our customers and users that are lending itself to a very, very significant loss in confidence in the ability to protect and recover data. And so, as has been our tradition on this VMUG webinar series, we aim to provide an education experience for you, our listeners today, by bringing in a number of industry experts. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be starting off with the keynote presentation by our guest speaker, Phil Goodwin, who is the Research Director for Storage Systems and Software at IDC. We're then going to turn it over to Jacob Cherian, who is VP of Product Strategy at Reduxio, who is going to describe some of the significant innovations in the storage category. And then we're going to end with what I believe will be a very valuable fireside chat with Michael Johnson. Michael is a very experienced IT professional. He's worked in Silicon Valley, and he's managed infrastructure for a number of global organizations, and he will be sharing with us both his reaction to what he's heard from both Phil and from Jacob, and to share his own experiences, his considerable experiences. So let's get started. We're gonna lead off with Phil Goodwin. Phil has been covering the data storage, data management space as an analyst since 1997. He's also worked on the vendor side in product management roles, and he's someone who is a frequent speaker at industry events, publishes a lot of research, and has a great contextual perspective to what's happening in the data storage protection and management arena. We will start off with his presentation, and then we'll move directly into a presentation by Jacob Cherian. Jacob is VP of Product Strategy at Reduxio Systems. Jacob, before joining Reduxio a few years ago, spent 14 years at Dell in their enterprise group. Jacob was named Inventor of the Year at Dell, and the number of patents that Jacob has under his name today is roughly 56. 47 have been approved by the USPTO, and 6 are pending. So he has spent a lot of time thinking about innovation and cutting-edge technology within the storage industry. When we conclude those 2 presentations, we will transition to a fireside chat with Michael Johnson, who runs infrastructure and desktop support for CPP. CPP is a 75-year-old organization. It's a global organization. CPP was the originator of the Myers-Briggs diagnostics test and a number of other diagnostic tests that are used throughout the world. So with this, Phil, I'd love to turn over the podium to you and ask you to share your thoughts. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the kind introduction, and it really is a pleasure to be with you guys today. you know, it is an exciting time, as you said, because it's a time of change for IT organizations, and you don't often hear exciting and data storage management used in the same sentence. But I think in this particular case, it really is a scenario where we're looking forward to exciting developments in this industry that really are game-changing types of events. And so what I'd like to talk about today is to help put into context what is driving such change and such innovation in the marketplace today. Starting with a little bit on the situation analysis, things that IT organizations are facing. I'm going to give you two bold predictions that I have for the future. I'm going to talk about why data has to change, and that's based on some of those bold predictions. So I'm kind of building a case or building a story here with respect to how we see things evolving over the next 7 to 10 years, as well as storage inefficiencies that we're noting in the industry, and then close with some practical guidance for IT buyers and IT users in the industry. I think most people are well aware that service level requirements are simply getting shorter and shorter. It wasn't all that long ago that backup and recovery provided 24-hour RPO, RTO, which simply became insufficient over a period of time. And now what we're finding is that we're rapidly driving to a situation which IDC has called the new race to zero, which is zero RPO and zero RTO. And if you think about those two things, what it really means is no downtime with no data loss. So that implies immediate recovery from any scenario, so that users have an always-on kind of availability for their applications. We're also finding that cloud is playing an important role, no surprise to most people. But the reason it has is because it's really changed the economics of data protection and how IT organizations can go about pursuing it. And then the third thing we're finding is that while folks are paying a lot of attention to RPO, in other words, how much data loss is tolerable, it's really the RTO that is the long pole in the tent, or the time that it takes to recover an application. A lot of the reason for that is because of the cost of downtime. Your RTO, recovery time objective, of course, refers to how long it takes to recover in the event of an outage. And IDC research has found that the average cost of downtime is about $100,000 per hour. That's a very high-level average across all industries, across all application types, across all organizational sizes. So, of course, one's mileage is going to vary and could vary quite a bit. And we found some applications that had $500,000 to $1 million per hour downtime cost. At the same time, we're finding that the standard RPO and RTO right now is about a 1 hour RPO, 1 hour of data loss, and a 4-hour recovery time for normal apps. Sometimes that gets down to about 15 minutes RPO and 1 hour for an RTO for critical apps. But if you think about what that means is that for a normal application, you would expect to lose about $400,000 worth of business productivity and other factors that go into that cost of downtime for any outage. When you can reduce that recovery time significantly, it's really money in the bank. And so it's something that we strongly recommend as a best practice, is to first quantify what your downtime cost is, ideally on a per application basis, and then calculate how much downtime you experience per year, particularly unplanned downtime, because it's the multiplication of those two numbers that tells you what the total loss is per year, and can then be used to justify what kind of infrastructure is necessary to solve that problem. And now I want to give you my two bold predictions. The first is that we believe that by 2020, storage area networks and network attached storage will be fully legacy systems by that time. And what we're seeing in the marketplace from a business perspective is those two markets are declining at about 4% per year We forecast that will continue for the foreseeable future and may accelerate in extended years. Now, that doesn't mean SAN and NAS are going away. They're certainly not. There's a long tail associated with both of those. But what it does mean is that those technologies will be used primarily to support existing legacy applications, and that newer applications or new application deployments will use newer storage platforms for their basis. Our second bold prediction is that by 2025, backup and recovery will cease as an IT activity. Of course, that doesn't mean that data protection goes away, but what it does mean is that nightly job that gets kicked off to back up data, predominantly to disk these days, although many organizations still use tape. But that activity will go away. And when you think about it, when you drive to zero RTO, and you're recovering transparently to the application, you start to say, well, why would I ever need to back up again? Well, there are some reasons you need long-term data retention, but we believe there are other technologies that are emerging that can solve that kind of situation. I want to take just a brief moment here to discuss what we call the data protection continuum, because this is really where we're going to be seeing the majority of the changes that will take place. You remember in the last slide I told you that part of the problem with SAN and NAS going legacy is that many organizations haven't really fully thought through the implications of that for their organization. Most people kind of agree with that prediction. There's occasionally quibbling on the timing, and I'm certainly willing to accept it. Maybe it's a little shorter, maybe it's a little longer. But the fact of the matter is SAN and NAS is no longer the standard for future storage technologies. And tied into that is your backup and recovery, which for a long time was the way of protecting data, became insufficient, so we added mirrors and clones, which protected from some kinds of failures, like hardware failures, but gave a very poor RPO and sometimes a pretty decent RTO. So then we came up with synchronous and asynchronous replication and snapshots, and each one of these technologies is used to compensate for a weakness of another technology or for some kind of limitation in its ability to address a particular type of data outage. So what IT organizations have wound up with is this continuum that is an interrelationship of products that is very complex to manage, difficult to put together, but necessary in order to address all the different data loss scenarios. So when you look at backup, snapshots, mirrors, synchronous replication, as well as purpose-built backup appliances, we find that organizations have to deal with a great deal of complexity. You have a lot of manual labor that goes into the recovery orchestration, to be able to get the right copy from the right place at the right time, which leads to a certain amount of error-prone operation because of the manual nature of it. We also find there's a lot of product overlap when you have multiple platforms. Oftentimes you have multiple snapshot products or mirroring products. I know the average number of backup and recovery products, according to our research in an organization, is 4. So there's a lot of overlap in that regard, which leads to unacceptable SLAs and so on. The bottom line here, though, is that all of these technologies are SAN and NAS based. They're all tied directly to hardware, and so when you think about SAN and NAS, if that's legacy, you have to start thinking about how you're going to manage that data protection in the future. The other thing that is a part and parcel of these different technologies, all used for data protection, is that when you're copying your data using snapshots and you're copying it using mirrors and clones and you're replicating it and you're backing it up and so on and so on and so on, we find that many organizations on average have about 15 copies of the same piece of data, all for primarily different data recovery scenarios. So it has become a grossly inefficient way of storing data, and it's led to what we call the copy data problem. If you have a primary piece of data and then you copy it a number of times, that's what we refer to as copy data. According to the research that we've done, up to about 60% of an IT organization's storage infrastructure is consumed simply storing all copy data, those 15 copies of data associated with the primary system. We find that by projecting that out, copy data will cost IT organizations $55.5 billion by 2020. And that's money that's directly out of the IT budget. If you can reduce that just 20%, you can imagine the huge savings that an IT organization could get by reducing that copy data. And moreover, most of the time that copy data is simply lying there, really doing nothing, simply waiting for something to go wrong. So IT organizations are recognizing this, and they're trying to find better ways to use that data. And what's happening is we're finding an emerging technology called copy data management, which provides a virtual view of that data rather than a physical copy. It gives a separate view of the data and allows organizations to more rapidly do application deployment because of app dev activities. They can refresh data almost instantaneously, and they can significantly reduce the amount of time that is needed to deploy that storage for the users. It's also been used for analytics situations. So now you're, instead of using data or copying data just for data protection, it's now being used for multiple purposes. So then that raises the question, what's next for data management? We're finding that data management is really evolving beyond the physical orientation. We've always been worried about backing up blocks and volumes and LUNs, and again, everything that's associated with those legacy SAN and NAS environments. What we're seeing now is much more of a move towards a virtual machine-centric environment, and I think that's even evolving as we speak to a more application-centric environment where organizations are making deployment decisions based on what is the best environment for the application, which might be, in many cases, a cloud environment, could be public cloud, private, or hybrid. But in some way, shape, or form, cloud is being involved in almost all new application deployments. What we're finding is that legacy applications really are largely staying put. They're not moving, but organizations are taking that opportunity when they have a new application deployment to include cloud. And a lot of that is driven by data protection, which in many cases is the tip of the spear on that on-ramp to integrating cloud rather than as a separate option as it might be for a legacy application. Once you start to do that, once you start to replicate data from primary storage system to primary storage, and part of that includes a hop off-site, whether it be private cloud or public cloud, really, in that case, you're starting to inherently get a disaster recovery scenario built in where you're able to move workloads and recover workloads across geographies. And at that point, it's becoming built in. And again, it's the economics of cloud fundamentally changing that. But of course, there's a downside to everything. So I want to tell you what the downside is in this case. And that is, number one, IT organizations really will be impacted by this change, particularly among the people who currently are doing backup administration, storage administration, things like that, where many of the older tasks that people were accustomed to doing are now no longer necessary. The silver lining for that, and we found this to be the case according to our research, about 94% of organizations, those people's time was freed up for higher value tasks, and they were able to move on and take on additional responsibilities within the data center that enhanced their value to the organization. But it also is going to incur some near-term disruption in that IT organizations have to manage diverse solutions based on platform. Again, different applications requiring different kinds of deployment models are going to be a challenge for those organizations. And so we recommend that IT organizations take a look at how that is going to occur over the near term. We're also finding that incumbent vendors are losing the power of incumbency, which is typical when you get a situation that we have right now where we're going through a period of flux and we're going through a lot of change. The old solutions simply are no longer the best necessarily, and so the previously safe choices for purchases are no longer the safe solution. So I'd like to close by giving you 4 pieces of essential guidance with respect to these changes. The first is for IT organizations to examine the data protection SLAs that you have today. And I will guarantee you that whatever your SLA is today, 2 years from now, it's going to be insufficient. And so you have to forecast that and figure out how it is you're going to address those service level requirements over the next 2 to 3 years. The second is to create a game plan for dealing with data protection for both legacy apps as well as the newer apps, so that you can both address the service level requirements for both of them, but also provide a transition within the organization. Third is to understand how cloud can be leveraged to improve your data protection SLA and disaster recovery, and look at how you can architect a solution such that data protection and disaster recovery simply become a part of the normal operating procedure of that platform. And then fourth, and perhaps arguably the most important, would be to make sure that IT skill sets remain ahead of the curve and that people are in the right place at the right time as these technologies evolve and as new skill sets are required. So I would like to extend my thanks to Reduxio here.
All right.
I know that you guys are coming up with, have put together your version 3 release. I'd like to congratulate you guys on that. I know it's a big milestone for an emerging company. And congratulations, and I'll turn it back over to Mike.
All right, Phil, thank you so much. Very interesting, and as you said, although not often in the same sentence, I think in terms of the perspective of users, some exciting opportunities here to really simplify the way that they do business. And I want everyone on the line to know that we will be moving to a Q&A after my fireside chat with Michael Johnson of CPP, so I encourage you to stay around and take the opportunity beginning now through the chat window to start sending us questions that you'd like to direct to Phil. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jacob Cherian, VP of Product Strategy at Reduxio. Jacob, of course, you've spent a lot of time in the storage industry. Would love to get your take now on how organizations could actually begin to implement some of these innovations that Phil just spoke to.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, folks. So you heard from Phil the challenges of getting to a zero RPO, zero RTO, and the complexity of infrastructure that customers have to deal with, that IT administrators have to deal with for their storage systems. Now, this is just a brief snapshot of what we consider the challenges that we hear from customers for their storage infrastructure. The first one, of course, is the issue of capacity, cost. This is always a trade-off a customer has to make about performance, capacity, and cost on what is the right solution to choose for a given application. The second issue is an issue that we definitely talked about right now, is the issue of how to get to lower RPOs and lower RTOs. And the third challenge is the fact that in the storage infrastructure, there is multiple silos of capability and capacity with multiple management points, and that leads to additional complexity of the infrastructure. So that's the problem set. That's the problem set for today. When Reduxio was founded in 2012, we looked at the future. We looked at what the challenges could be, and we came up with a very simple idea. Our idea was to break down the silos of capability and capacity that exist in the storage infrastructure and the goal being to simplify the storage infrastructure that customers have to deploy. And how did we plan to do that? The answer was very simple. It was three simple things that we figured we needed to do. Deliver fast primary storage, that just works. Primary storage is where the data lands. That's where data management starts. That's where applications write the data. So you need to have primary storage, that just works. And then unify data protection, DR, and copy data management into that platform. This does not mean that the primary storage platform is the place where the data lives, but it is the place from which all these capabilities can be managed. And the last one is make it simple, make it easy for people to use. There's no need for complexity. Technology has progressed to the point that we can make it simple. However, when you deal with legacy, you end up with solutions that are extremely complex because of legacy reasons, not because it is what is required by the customer use case. Okay, so we started with this vision of breaking down the silos of capability and capacity in the data center. We had to start somewhere. And the first step was delivering primary storage. So that's what we did. Our first product is the Reduxio HX550. It's a flash storage system. It introduced backdating, which is the ability to recover data at 1 second granularity. And backdating obsolete snapshots. Think of all the complexity in creating schedules for snapshots, for creating consistency groups when you want to have complex applications that are protected by snapshots. We eliminated all those problems to the administrator with backdating. And backdating provides the ability for administrators to recover data at 1 second granularity with no configuration. No-Dedupe was our always-on dedupe and compression capability. And in addition, we introduced TRX, which is our automated and continuous data relocation service that results in a much lower cost of storage because we're able to manage multiple tiers within the system. And StoreSense, which is our self-service and remote support portal, so that when you have an issue, we know about it before you're aware of it, and we can start working on the problem. Okay, so now I want to give a little bit of information about backdating because this is really the innovative capability that we introduced when we launched the HX550 in 2015. This product has been very successful. To date, we have had more than 100 customers who have deployed the HX550. That's in a year, and that's pretty amazing for a new product that has entered the storage market. I want to give you a little bit of overview of backdating. Backdating is our ability to recover data to any second. Backdating is always on. Backdating does not require any configuration. Backdating allows an administrator to recover any volume in the system at the granularity of 1 second. And backdating, from an architectural standpoint, allows you to go back forever at 1 second granularity. Now, forever requires infinite amount of space, and therefore we provide policies by which you can limit how much historical data is kept so that you get 1 second recovery. And after that, it gets thinned down to every hour, every day, every week, every month. Now, what are we doing when we're doing backdating? Are we taking snapshots every second? And the answer is no. To do backdating and to do everything that I talked about to create that simplification in the storage infrastructure, we had to think about storage differently. We had to create a new paradigm, a new architecture for building storage. And that architecture starts with going from being volume-centric to being data-centric. And I'll explain very quickly what that means. If you look at a traditional storage system, the volume is the center of the architecture of the storage system. You have a volume, which has some kind of a mapping table that maps to locations where the data eventually lives. When you take a snapshot or a clone, what you're essentially doing is you're creating a copy of the metadata so that the metadata points to the same locations. When you have a write, you allocate a new block, you update the mapping table to point to the new locations. Now, this explains why it is impossible for snapshots-based systems to provide you RPOs of 1 second. There is a lot of metadata overhead when you take a snapshot. There is a resource overhead, a system overhead when you actually take a snapshot because data has to be copied, and therefore you cannot take a snapshot every second. It's just not practical. To solve that problem and to solve this issue of how do you build a system that can actually go simplify the silos, we came up with a data-centric architecture. And the data-centric architecture is very simple. We start with the data. The volume is no longer a container of storage. A volume is just a property of data. So if you look at our core metadata, I'm just giving you a snapshot of our core metadata. Our metadata is a record of updates that happen to the system. So when every new IO comes to the system, we add an entry which basically says what data has arrived in the system, when it arrived in the system. And what this allows us to do is actually go back in time second by second with no configuration. So when we are backdating in our system, we are not doing an operation. Backdating is a normal state of the system. The ability to go back in time is a normal state of the system. This architecture also provides the abstraction of the logical view of data, which is a volume from the physical data which we store on our system. And this really leads up to how we do NoRestore, which is the capability that unifies data protection into the primary storage system. NoRestore is new in TimeOS 3.0. That is the latest release of TimeOS that can be available in our product tomorrow. It is built-in cloud-integrated DR capability, policy-based protection with RPOs as low as 5 minutes. This is the RPO today. We're definitely going to be working on reducing the RPO further. You can restore a volume instantaneously, which is near zero RTO, and I'm definitely going to explain how that works. It supports any iSCSI device or an S3 object store, including the Amazon public cloud as a repository for keeping your protection information. So you no longer have to use another Reduxio storage system, another light system to keep your data. You're not keeping this on tape. You're keeping it on any iSCSI device or an S3 object store, including the public cloud for your protection data. Let me show you how this works. How does NoRestore work? You take any volume in our system that needs to be protected. You define a repository, which might be the Amazon cloud, the public cloud. You set a policy for the volume, which defines the RPO and the retention that you want for the protection information that lives in the cloud. Now, the minute the policy is set for the volume, the system basically sends continuous incrementals to the cloud. So basically what we're doing is we're sending continuous incrementals based on the desired RPO and the retention period to the cloud in fully deduped and compressed form. Now, in addition, we also make sure that we never send data that's already present in the cloud from the primary storage system twice. So you actually get deduped and compressed data that's flowing on the wire, and you also get optimization so that data that is already present in the repository, which is the cloud, is not sent again. So you're saving on space in the cloud, you're saving on network bandwidth to actually do the data protection. In addition, this also means that you get much finer RPOs. When you have a disaster, you take another Reduxio system, you point it at the repository. The repository basically publishes a catalog of available recovery points, and the recovery system can instantiate any volume that's available on that repository instantaneously. So you get access to data instantaneously from the cloud. Okay. So I said instantaneous. I'm going to show you how instantaneous works. It's very simple. It basically uses a virtualization capability of a storage system. When we get a read request, if we don't have the data on our system, we basically forward the request to the cloud or the repository to read the data from the repository. And this basically uses the virtualization capability of our system. This uses the capability of our system to basically instantiate volumes without the data, to create the volume and present it to the application. When we receive a host side IO, we go read the data associated with that request from the cloud. in the background, we're also doing background reads to bring the data that is not being requested back to the primary storage system. Now, the benefit of presenting the volume and making the volume accessible immediately to the host is the host is telling us what is the most important data that it needs. So you pay an initial latency when you do the first read, when we don't have the data, but because the host is telling what is the most important data, we're able to preferentially fetch the data and restore it back to the system so that your system, your application gets back to full performance at a much shorter time period compared to having to read all the data in. Writes coming into the system are always handled locally, so there is no latency or performance impact on the write. Okay, so what are the use cases? So I talked about DR as a use case, but think of how NoRestore creates a shared repository of copy data. And if you think of NoRestore as a way for you to actually create repositories of copy data in a centralized location, you can think of how this can be used for sharing data between multiple systems. You can use this for disaster recovery. You can do this for copy data management. Again, if you go back to the talk that Phil gave, he talked about how people have multiple copies of data and want to use data for multiple applications. A given data set might be applicable for multiple applications, for test dev, for analytics, and this provides a mechanism for you to unify the data and then distribute the data instantaneously to multiple users. I want to talk about an associated capability that we're adding to the product in version 3, which is NoMigrate. NoMigrate is the ability to instantaneously migrate a volume from any storage system, any iSCSI storage system, to Reduxio. Again, this works exactly the way the NoRestore's instantaneous restore works. We basically instantiate a volume minute we connect to the remote storage system. We present the volume on Reduxio. You can migrate your applications, although the data might still be sitting on the system from which you're migrating the volume. Reads are forwarded to the system. Writes are always handled locally, and in the background, we run a process by which we bring the data in back to Reduxio so that the application can go to full performance. All right, to summarize, NoRestore with Reduxio flash storage provides the capability to unify primary and secondary storage management into a single platform. You significantly reduce the cost and complexity of your storage infrastructure, and you eliminate the complex processes that you have for recovering and protecting your data. And with that, I'll hand it off to Mike. Thank you.
Jacob, thank you, and please do stick around for the Q&A as well. All right, and so as we move into the final formal discussion before the Q&A, it's my privilege to introduce Michael Johnson. Michael is Director of Infrastructure and Desktop Support for CPP. I first got to know Michael within the last year when he became a customer of Reduxio's. Michael has spent over 25 years involved in business and info systems project management. He's based on the West Coast and is someone who has the Silicon Valley mindset, very ready and willing to embrace innovation within his IT infrastructure to drive competitive advantage for his company. Michael, welcome. I know Michael is in London today, and Michael was generous enough to devote his evening to joining us. Michael, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Well, hey, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And this is a very exciting time right now.
It actually is. And you know, Michael, you're being in London, of course, maybe we can start off with just a brief overview of the IT infrastructure that you manage. CPP is a global organization. You do have data centers in the U.S. You have data centers in London. Could you take a couple of minutes to describe for our listeners exactly the kind of environment that you have to manage all day, every day?
So I really have small teams in both areas, in our UK office as well as in our US office. But we do have leading edge technology in both locations, and we decided a while back to focus on continuous improvements within inside of our infrastructure. And I'm always on the lookout for that kind of diamond in the rough that's going to satisfy our business requirements. And with forward thinking, we chose Reduxio to actually help us do this. But our infrastructure is a global infrastructure. We have data centers in the UK, data centers in the US. We have on-prem infrastructure as well in the offices, and we do have 5 remote offices as well. So we have a team right now of approximately 10 to 12 IT individuals supporting the entire infrastructure. We're mostly virtualized infrastructure, and we run a virtual stack. That's the best way to reduce our complexity and really increase our capacity and increase our performance at the same time, and reduce our total cost of ownership of the entire stack.
Okay, and again, the word complexity is a key word here, right? And I think as Phil led us off today, he presented, I think, a pretty compelling case that we've gotten to the breaking point on complexity, especially around the management and the protection of data. Based on what you've seen, Mike, as a hands-on operating guy, what's your perspective on what Phil shared, and what are some of maybe the key elements that you think are most important in terms of the way you manage CPP's infrastructure globally?
So I think that Phil shared some great information on the metrics around today's challenges with data protection, and he really was able to articulate, what those were and put some dollar figures to it. So that was some great insight, and thank you, Phil, for doing that. But we all face those same challenges, and the cost of data protection is skyrocketing through the roof, and we're always looking for innovative ways of still protecting our data, but yet keeping the cost low, and there's not really an elegant solution out there. And now there is, obviously, but it's really taken a while to get to this point. Over the years, my biggest challenge has been tape, doing this replication between sites and trying to protect our data any way possible. And as Phil pointed out, I mean, all the media that we spin up to protect our data is very, very costly and very expensive. One thing I'd like to add to what Phil said is we didn't really touch on the OpEx savings when you start reducing the complexity within inside of your infrastructure. Now, we talked a little bit about, keeping your skill set of your team ahead of the curve, and that's true for the most part. But if we're able to reduce the complexity and simplify the interface for doing storage and some of these other technologies, then the skill set of your team doesn't need to be as high. So when you need to hire qualified people for the job, I don't need to hire like 5 SAN engineers just to run my SAN infrastructure. I can have one guy that has a basic understanding of storage, and he can step in and do it all in no time.
That is a very interesting point. And again, I think all of us, right, from the bring your own device to work days where the iPhone overwhelmed IT organizations around the world, and people were demanding they wanted to bring their simplified iPhone to work and toss their BlackBerries. We're seeing certainly this extraordinary move toward sophisticated design, user experience, customer experience, as a way to do exactly what you just suggested, right? And of course, it all originated in the consumer electronics space, but it is beginning to flow increasingly because of demand from people like you into the enterprise space. So perhaps you can comment on that. I mean, what do you see in terms of the IT infrastructure vendors that you work with and the difficulties perhaps where they haven't really taken into consideration the importance of OpEx savings and productivity savings that allow you to hire potentially less skilled, less expensive people?
So, and that actually is my challenge, is trying to find that technology out there. And to tell you the truth, I go to trade shows, I look for it, I see all of the big name brands out there at all these trade shows selling the same old stuff. But really, it's the other guys that are around the peripheral that are coming up with these new innovative ways of doing things. And that's what I really look for. And I vet generally every technology that I bring into my organization through my team. We bring it in, we do proof of concepts on it, we see if it's going to be a match for our company, and if it looks like something we can leverage or utilize inside of our organization, then we obviously jump on that bandwagon. But in today's world, it's so true. I mean, you take a look at the personal devices and how that technology has gone into the enterprise, but also the enterprise has gone into the personal devices as well. So it's a two-way street. And if you're a mid-sized company, it was to the point where you couldn't really take advantage of some of these enterprise solutions because the complexity and the amount of people you need to hire to support that stuff was just kind of outside of your reach. Now, the technology is within inside of everybody's reach. Small, medium, large companies, and the technology that these smaller companies are utilizing, these enterprise companies are turning around looking and saying, well, what have we been doing wrong? And this is where, the larger companies are taking advantage of some of the smaller stuff as well. So that's pretty cool.
That's great. And Michael, when you and I first met, we had a very interesting discussion, right, and very much walked away with, you absolutely are someone who is an absolute sort of hunter, right, that you are someone who prides yourself on staying on the cutting edge of technology and looking for those unique opportunities to bring something in that has positive impact on your infrastructure. So, you wound up somehow coming to Reduxio's doorstep, and maybe you can just describe to people what it was that you saw when you first engaged with us, right, because you started with us with version 2, 2.6, 2.7. So before we talk about what you hope to realize as an early beta customer, someone who's very aware of some of the new features that Jacob discussed, what were the original capabilities about Reduxio that got you excited enough to decide to bring us into your infrastructure?
So I want to really, let's put the technology aside just for a second. Really with the Reduxio team. That the salespeople, all the managers within inside the organization, even you, Mike, when we got together to discuss technology, everybody's excited, right? And bring that excitement to the table and be able to articulate, discuss things, and talk about new innovative ways of doing things and the ideas, discussing the roadmap of where Reduxio has started, and where it's going to, and what you've accomplished so far. And I've seen the direction that Reduxio was going in. And believe me, I've worked with every SAN vendor out there, right? NAS or SAN vendor out there. And really the team is first class. Now, that's really what attracted me to Reduxio, to actually take a deeper look into your product to see if it's something that we can utilize within inside of our infrastructure. And the more I started digging into it, I'm saying, wow, this is some really great technology. And I would really like to get one of these boxes in my organization to test it out to see if it really holds true to what these guys are saying it does. So that's kind of how I got into it. And the whole backdating thing and the earlier versions, V2, what a fantastic idea that is. I can't tell you, how well that's served our organization, since we put the box in place. What a fantastic piece of technology that is. And which also, during our proof of concept and stuff, we've seen it. We just really didn't see how it was going to act in my development or production environment until we started using it. And that's, the love just started to grow from there. And now I've had my fingers on V3, and now it's fantastic. So, I don't want to steal too much thunder away from you, Michael, but it's great.
No, that's great. So what is it about V3 then, Michael? I know that just the fact that we had previewed our roadmap to you and you were aware of V3 and it was a part of the consideration for, partnering with Reduxio earlier on. But based on what Phil described today and what you heard from Jacob and of course your own personal experience with V3, having been one of our very first customers to get your hands on it, what additional capabilities does that bring to you and what pressures does that relieve for you in your day-to-day job?
So it gives me peace of mind, first of all, V3 does. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But, when you first presented, Reduxio to me and you said, okay, here's where we're at today. Here's where we'd like to be. Everybody's trying to get to market quick with their products and make sure that they're fully GA'd. And when you present your roadmap to me and then you hit your dates, I just want to point that out. It's very difficult to put a stake in the ground and reach those goals as an organization, and Reduxio did that. And when you guys hit your date and came out with V3, I was really excited that you hit that date. So thank you for that, because that was the other side of the technology that I was waiting for. So the whole NoRestore, What a fantastic idea that is. So it enables me to easily back up all my volumes. It gives me some flexibility. I can choose my target destinations. I can send it over to the UK to another Reduxio over there, back up to iSCSI target, or maybe some legacy iSCSI target if I just want to dump some data there. Or I can put it out to a cloud source, whether it's Amazon, Azure, whatever it is, some S3 cloud storage. And that's fine. I know my data is protected. But it's really an easy way to do it. And if you go through the interface and see how easy it is to set it up and to set up your schedules and everything, it's, I'm pretty excited. It works really, really, really well. And that's great. That's only part of what the V3 did. So I have legacy SANs in my infrastructure, and I'm trying to get the data off of those SANs. And it's hard, especially when you have a lot of things like booting from SAN or whatever you're doing. It's really a real challenge to migrate that data.
Yeah. Michael, have I lost you? Hello, Michael? Candace, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we may have lost. Yeah, okay, we may have lost Michael. Michael, I guess if you're not on, I'm hoping you'll dial in. And while Michael dials in, redials in, because he's calling in from London. I've actually had my call disconnected twice while we're on the phone, but thank God during times when both Phil and Jacob were speaking. Let me start directing some questions both to Jacob and to Phil at this point in time. So, Phil, from your perspective, right? What can you react to what you just heard from Michael? And
hey guys,
how does that?
I'm sorry, I dropped off.
Oh, okay, great. No worries, Michael. I got disconnected twice myself. So, Michael, you were unfortunately not when I had to be on, but. Let me just let you finish your thought, and then I've got a number of questions that our audience has pushed at me that are being directed toward you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so just really quick about the NoMigrate. So I have several technologies, several SANs out here that I was utilizing in my environment. And to migrate the data off of an old SAN, I won't say any brand names or anything, over to a different SAN is a very, very challenging and difficult task, and I have to take down my whole production infrastructure to do it. And the NoMigrate, wow. Well, I'm telling you, I just point and click, and everything just happens. Now, that's fantastic. So I don't have to have, 3 or 4 of my guys and my high-level engineers, SAN engineers in a room trying to brainstorm how we're going to do this with as little downtime as possible. The NoMigrate just enabled me to migrate things off my old legacy stuff onto the Reduxio, and it's like a point-and-click sort of thing, and it's done. So, that's fantastic.
That's great.
So the other part, is, what it's done for me is give me really a peace of mind knowing that I have this flexibility. When I have this kind of flexibility, I can get more done in a very short period of time, not only myself but with my team and with the business. So at the end of the day, what Reduxio has done for me is to help my development staff bring our products to market quicker than they normally would have. And that's a significant impact, positive impact to our organization. So
absolutely.
There you have it.
All right. Well, Michael, listen, I'm gonna start firing with just a few questions at you as we start to wind down here. I think from some of your more hands-on oriented colleagues, they wanted to understand specifically how long your evaluation of your proof of concept was before you actually had the confidence to move into a production environment with Reduxio.
So I took the baby steps. I have different tiers of storage. I have my tier 3 storage, my tier 2 storage, and then my tier 1 storage. So all proof of concepts, start like at tier 3. What can we do? How can we, use this storage device inside of our infrastructure? And after we started seeing our capabilities, we said, oh, well, you know what? We need to make this a tier 2 storage device. We go through our testing as far as performance testing and, does it meet our criteria for performance and capacity? And the answer was yes. It's like, okay, well now, where does this best fit into our environment? Well, it fits really well into our development and QA environment for our Tier 1 storage for them, but also our Tier 1 for our customer-facing systems as well. So basically from proof of concept, which was about, we spent 1 day setting it up. We understood what we wanted to get out of it. And then we kept it in play for like 30 days, but we already made up our mind that we're going to keep it before we finished the POC totally. It met all of our performance criteria, and I bought several boxes. We'll just say that.
Okay. Well, that's great. And one of the things, of course, with data protection is the implication of security. So one of the questions that comes from our listeners is, what were some of the network security problems or concerns or challenges that you had to overcome when you decided to actually bring Reduxio in-house, if any?
Network security problems. So I have a virtual infrastructure, and so when it comes to network security, that's not really a challenge for me. We have a segmented network. It's all VLAN properly. We have our security around those networking pieces. But and when we connect to our cloud storage, there's network and security in between there as well. So basically, it's an encrypted tunnel. We send the data across. It's really not an issue for us. Once again, we simplified our whole infrastructure. So it's pretty standard stack from edge to core.
Yeah. Okay. And you alluded to this earlier. I think you intrigued somebody. How many of the Reduxio 550 systems are actually in production now with CPP globally?
Well, I know that we have 3 or 4 in production right now.
Okay. All right. Great. So I'm gonna just shift gears quickly. Phil, I'm hoping you can hear me, but you've had a chance now to listen to Michael's comments and to hear his questions, the answers to his questions. Any reaction that you would have to how his approach squares with what you've been saying?
Yeah, it is an interesting approach because he articulated a lot exactly the problems that we see in the broader market as well, which is how do you move through these challenges of simplifying your environment. That's just a huge thing we hear from our IT clients frequently is the dealing with complexity. I also thought it was a really interesting point that he made that the cost that I referred to didn't include OpEx, and he's absolutely right.
Right.
The cost that I referred to is infrastructure only. OpEx is on top of that.
Yeah, and Phil, you may remember a call we had with one of Reduxio's MSP VARs where they made that comment very emphatically, right? And again, I think it's a great setup to my next question, right? Because what we had talked about is the unification of primary and secondary storage and sort of a single pane of glass, single UI, common reporting system. So you made a very important point about unified storage, and I'd like to ask all 3 of our speakers very quickly, right? Because I think there could be some confusion, and I think Phil built a very strong case for it. But Phil, maybe starting with you, what does unified primary and secondary storage really mean?
Well, I think what it means in practical terms is it eliminates the need for a separate backup infrastructure or data protection infrastructure. And that's big from a cost savings perspective as well as simplification and operations.
Yeah, okay. And that would then certainly, reduce OpEx as well. And Jacob, how about you from your perspective? What does unified primary and secondary storage mean?
Completely agree with Phil. I think if you look at customer requirements, what customers want is different classes of storage. And the management of those classes, if you can unify them, it definitely leads to that reduction in overall complexity and OpEx and CapEx. Yeah.
Okay. And Michael, as the guy that actually has to make this work in practice, do you agree with that definition, or do you want to add something to it?
Oh no, I definitely agree with that definition. Yes.
Okay.
Nothing really there.
Well, listen, All right, thank you. So listen, we have run out of time. First, I want to invite those of you who are on the call with us still to, if you found this to be of educational benefit, to go to the Reduxio website to our Beyond the Blocks blog. We have 2 other similar VMUG webinars, same format, with an analyst, a subject matter expert, a customer, and a Reduxio employee. One was on ransomware. The second one was on application performance benchmarking. Both of them were widely viewed and well received, so just want to continue to provide education to the community. I also want to just thank, first and foremost, Michael Johnson for being kind enough and generous enough to dial in from London later in the day, from CPP to Phil Goodwin, who's been just an absolute pleasure to work with as we've gotten ready for this webinar, and finally to my esteemed colleague Jacob Cherian for joining us today. Mike Grandinetti from Reduxio signing off.